Okay, this is unprecedented. A Heroes of Humility recording with two of us, which might make it easier on the listener, to be honest.
A duo.
Yeah, just a duo, fantastic duo. Beige, one of the originating Ho members, OG Ho.
The OG, yeah.
And myself.
The OH.
So we had some plans with a number of other people. We had Levin was on his way, but something happened. He may not make it to the recording. And we had a guest lined up. She's still really excited to be here. So I realized insensitively I had her set a recording for Father's Day. Beige is really being gracious because he's a dad. So he's here. Some people are sacrificing for that. So we appreciate it, Beige.
Well, and I already had a little bit of Father's Day with my kids this morning. My oldest made me breakfast, which was awesome.
Oh, nice, dude. You didn't tell me that. I'm glad you saved that for the podcast.
My oldest made me breakfast, and then they got me a gift and everything. So
wow,
I got to spend a little time with them already. And then as soon as I head out of here, pick up something for my son on the way home, and then spend the rest of the day with the kids.
That sounds good, dude. Yeah, I guess usually I kind of rub it in your guys' face that I have certain assets that maybe you don't, and I feel bad when I listen to that later. And I guess what I'm talking about is it's usually some shallow thing. But what you have, dude, is you have a name and a legacy, DNA offspring that will live on. And Pierce doesn't have that. And I hope you don't right now feel bad, like you're rubbing in my face, telling me how fun your Father's Day is and everything. But, I don't have anybody to share my Star Wars weirdness with or anything. It's just going to die with me, unfortunately. I hope I haven't bumped anybody out.
Maybe if you do like Ancestry or something, maybe you got a kid out there somewhere, Pierce, you don't know about.
I'm pretty sure I don't. I think that's comical and to suggest, but I've been pretty careful with my seed and all those things. I can't believe I just maybe edit that out. But yeah, so we're missing 11. We were actually excited because I invited him to bring his boys, which I would love to have them come on too. And I thought it would be a cool Father's Day. But what we thought we would discuss today. Oh, and so we're going to do a cosplay episode. And so we had to reschedule that with our original guest. We identified that we were having her in some of our social media. So that's still something to look forward to. We're very excited about that. And that'll be only the second time that we've ever had a very wisdomous, probably the better, in a lot of ways, superior to our human male intellect. So it'll be the second time we've had a female on. We're looking forward to that. And she's going to really enlighten us on what it's like to do cosplay, what cosplay really is. I think I have an understanding, but I know I don't. She's way more seasoned in the cosplay realm, and she'll let us know what it's like. We're interested to hear a female's perspective on what it's like going to Comic-Cons and dressing up like your favorite character and dealing with all the different, sometimes weird social things that happen that I've seen, in those environments. Beige isn't even really that familiar with cosplay, so.
Yeah, not at all. Never been to a Comic-Con, never.
Wow, you've never been, yeah.
Never been. Nope.
That's great. It's kind of weird to meet somebody, because I've been a few times, and to meet somebody who hasn't been, it's interesting now. I feel like a lot of
the only time I think I've seen people dress up is Halloween, pretty much.
Yeah, that used to be the case, but now it's
or the only time I've probably ever dressed up myself, actually, Halloween.
And I don't know if we call it dressing up in the cosplay world, but we'll let her. Yeah, I
right.
think that's kind of a rookie terminology. I think we say suit up, but maybe that's just
pretty high speed.
Again, what's cool is when she comes on, she's going to have a lot of like cred. She's going to know her stuff. So it's not going to be like me just speaking theoretically about it from my small perspective. And I've come into contact with her through philanthropy efforts. But anyway, we'll save that.
Humble brag.
Yeah, I didn't mean to advertise that, but we'll get to that next time when she comes on. In this one, we're going to talk about Dad's Day, Father's Day, and what that means to us. We'll learn what Beige has gleaned from being an amazing dad.
Even though I'm here on Father's Day.
Yeah, even though let's not hold that against him. He's still a good dad. In fact, I've kind of told him this, and I don't want to embarrass him here internationally. I think people listen to this across the world. But he is like the daddy of our podcast. He's like our daddy. And I think that's because he brings some enlightenment about things that I think you only learn as being a dad. But I think anybody can kind of be a dad. And I'll explain a little bit about that later. But
true that.
That's probably a very long introduction to what you're about to hear. Enjoy.
Heroes of
Humility, 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 humility. Humility, humility. This is not a charade. This is real.
These words you are about to hear are coming from real humans on a mission to save the human race from itself. Buckle up while these delusional heroes of humility, aka hoes, attempt to right the wrongs in everyday human behavior.
So, dude, thanks for making the drive over, and glad to hear that you had an awesome time with your kids so far this morning, and you're going to be back over there with them soon where you belong. But appreciate you being here on Father's Day and being the daddy of Heroes of Humility.
No worries, man. The show must go on, as they say, right?
The show goes on. It's just the two of us. We'll get Red back. We'll see what's going on with 11. But yeah, dude, I was thinking that there are times, and I've had this in my life, or I've even gone to guys that I worked with that had been on the job a lot longer than I. And sometimes you realize that you have some wisdom to impart. In my case, maybe wisdom's too strong of a word, but I have something to give. You know, I have maybe some best practice or recommendation. And I've had some people as I've gotten older that have come up to me and asked me, hey, you know, how would you do that? Or what would you do? And I think sometimes you don't realize it. You can be like a dad to somebody that maybe they didn't get some help. And then you realize they're not just asking me about a work thing. This is like something that I remember learning from my dad when I was very young, but they're asking me something that they never learned about that isn't just job related, but it's like just about dealing with people or just about how to confront a situation or an adversarial situation. And I think dads bring a lot to our lives. Even when you have a dad who dropped the ball, hopefully there's something you learn from him, even if he messed up. Maybe you'll learn how not to do that or how to be a better person or dad or an advisor to somebody. I mean, what do you think? I think there's other ways to be like that for people.
People always say there's a difference between being a father and being a dad. Like, what makes a dad? I think, you know, when we say Father's Day, obviously you have the biological aspect of children, but that's not what makes a father, right? And that's more of teaching somebody how to kind of navigate their way through life. As a father, I think the most important thing, well, one of the most important things to realize is that you don't know everything, and then that's okay that you don't know everything, and realize that there are those limitations. I think people get into trouble when, and back to the name of this show, right, Heroes of Humility, but I think people get into trouble when they don't humble themselves and realize like, hey, maybe I don't know everything, but that's okay. And if we realize that there's still things to learn, then you can go through life trying to still learn and not be closed-minded on everything. So I know that on the previous show, Pierce had mentioned a coach and stuff. I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, if you grow up without a father in your life, young men, a lot of times, even young women too, you know, they'll find that coach as almost like a father figure as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about biology, right? How many people out there, they have stepchildren? Well, they're not your biological child, but you're probably more of a father than the biological father ever was, right? Yeah. So it's about what do you do in your life? What do you prioritize? And what kind of model are you setting for these kids? Because you have to know as a parent, everything you do, your kids are watching. Everything you don't do, your kids are watching, and they're modeling their behavior after you. They're either telling themselves, yeah, I want to be like him, or I want to do that, or I don't want to do that. But literally almost everything you do is like, I do want to do that, or I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, what do you think as a dad, Beige, that from your perspective, do you think you can tell or advise somebody, and let's not just relate this to kids, but let's relate it to coworkers or people that have come to you for advice. Do you think you can ever give somebody some advice and then they see you do the complete opposite or do like a, hypocritically different thing? Or do you think that's possible? I mean, you've heard the old adage, hey, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, do you think that's possible? Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, does that work? No. Does that happen all the time? Yeah, I try to minimize that, like in my own life, because once somebody is labeled as a hypocrite, they lose all credibility from that point forward, right? Like, because even that one thing, oh, well, everything that you tell me in the future, you probably don't really mean that either. So your general credibility is kind of out the window when that happens. So I never like that, well, do it just because I said to do it. as a parent. I think that's what kids hear a lot of times. Well, why? Oh, because I'm your dad and I told you to, that's why. And on the one hand, it's like, okay, what's the lesson there, right? Like the lesson there are going to be people in your life that are going to be your superiors, whether that's your boss, you're in the military, that's your commanding officer, or when you're younger, that's your dad, that's your mom. There's certain things that will happen in your life where you may question them and say, well, this is dumb. Why are we doing this? Well, you're in a job, you're probably going to have to end up doing something because there's somebody above you that told you how to do that. And that's a life lesson.
Yeah, simply because somebody told me to do it.
Right. And so that's one way to look at it. But as a parent, everything that you do, you're trying to teach your child how to navigate through life a little easier, or maybe to not make some of those mistakes. But you also have to realize as a parent, people are going to make mistakes, and that's how people learn the best. I know, like, even in your job, right? Everybody probably has made mistakes in their career or in their personal life. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but with me, that's always been the best way I've learned, is through my mistakes.
Yeah, I think mistakes are a good way to learn. I've seen pretty much two different types of learning processes. Either somebody is really willing and they're hungry for advice. They take it to heart and then they actually implement it before they make the mistake. And then there's the people, like you said, that have to learn from the mistake themselves. And I've been one of the learners that usually gets the advice and can go with that and look at how to avoid risk and go that route. But I definitely see what you're saying.
But there may be things that occur in your life where there is no advice.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
That's another thing is, well, who can I talk to that's been through this or can help me through this? And there may be people out there that want to give you advice, but have they been through? That's where I come from. Is if you're going to give somebody advice, you have to have some credibility there as well.
It helps for sure, I would think.
And so there's certain situations where you're not going to have this sage out there, this wise person giving you advice. You just need to go through it and come out the other side, and then that makes you the wise person at that point.
And here's a scary thought: if you don't have somebody like that, Google might be your advisor, or maybe
nowadays,
some YouTube video. But that may not always be. It's like when you go on the internet because you have some symptom and you start to research the heck out of it, and you find out that you pretty much diagnose yourself with some
it always ends
ailment.
with like you have cancer. That's the way it always ends.
Is this a tumor or is it just a pimple? Right? And
is this a hangnail? Oh, it's a cancerous. It's a toe cancer here.
It's a sticker I got 3 weeks ago. It's still. I remember hearing my parents discuss for an hour, which seemed like an hour to me. I was a kid. Maybe it was only 5 minutes, but it was a long time in my mind. And my dad said, "Look, the sticker will come out on its own. Just leave it in his finger." And my mom was like, "We need to take that out. It has to be removed."
See, but that's what it goes back to what I was saying. The mother's the nurturer, the carer. Like, I want to take care of my son and make sure he feels better now.
Yeah, my dad.
Whereas dad's like, he's going to learn.
Yeah, he's going to let him bleed to death with the sticker sticking out of his.
Yeah.
And he's impaled, but it's not going to kill him. There's different levels of impalement.
Well, and then he's going to learn, and guess what? He probably won't get a sticker in his hand
he'll be more careful around the wood instead of running out there like a dum-dum, playing. But my mom, I think she won. Most of the arguments, I think my mom won, which I will give it up for dads because dads, I think,
that's called a marriage, yeah.
That's called just making things, happy wife is a happy life. My mom won a lot of those arguments, but I would see my dad brought the comedy. And what my dad would do when my mom was yelling at me is he would be standing behind her, mimicking her. So I got the fear from my mom using force or the threat of force in the house. But then my dad, who was actually not the forceful one, would use comedy or he would use a very intellectual way, and both worked.
See, and that's generally probably different than the way a lot of families are.
Right,
whereas
reversed.
The father's the disciplinarian
The
and the mother's
the
kind of like, the mom's the one that they can run to and be like, cry
the
to.
Dad's the abusive beater, and the mom is just kind of like, it does seem reversed. My dad was a gentle soul, God rest his soul, and today I thought about him as I do, and there are some ways that he was able to always be there and with advice for me but then there are other ways that he couldn't because we have limitations. And I think when you really become an adult is when you realize that things aren't perfect and the people that I thought were perfect, they're not.
Oh, nobody's
they're
perfect.
human.
Yeah.
Yeah. You learn that. And you've talked about that to me before in private off the mics here. That you've explained to your kids, look, here's a way that I made a mistake, or here's something I'm not perfect, but this is why I'm telling you.
Well, and it's like like so many things in life are a balance, right? If you look at all the, I mean, not to get too philosophical, but if you look at a lot of the religions and stuff, or even like the yin and the yang, a lot of this is about balance. It's rooted in human nature and history and everything, and even raising kids and navigating your way through life, that's all a balance too. You can't be too far one way or else you'll come off as a tyrant. And like, I don't want, as a parent, do I want my kids to listen to me? Yes. Do I want my kids to listen to me because they're internally motivated to do the right thing and because they respect me? I would prefer that over fear. Right?
It's longer lasting.
It's longer lasting, and it's just, even like, think about in your workplace. If you have a boss that you respect, your performance is based on the respect, or you're internally motivated, as opposed to if you're dealing with some tyrant, you just do it because you have to, basically. And it's just not as substantive, and it's short-lived, like you said. So everything is kind of a balance. Okay, there's times where, yes, you need to set the rules and discipline and to reinforce those, but you can't be that way 100% of the time because you're not getting that balance there.
And I think it spills over for sure to all of us in society, because do you want a bunch of people who do the right thing only through the threat of force? Or, you know, it's like, have you ever heard the saying that locks keep honest people honest?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like that, because I think that there are two different types of people, and they probably are created through this environment, maybe how they were taught. And this is where dads
Well, I prefer the person that would be honest irregardless of if the door's unlocked or not, because they know within that there's wrong and right, and they're not,
It's not this threat of some kind of force or mandated or secured method that you can't circumvent like a lock. It's the idea that they've integrated it into their psyche, where they understand and they've internalized why they need to behave this way instead of that way. That's what we want in society, right?
Right. There's internally motivated people and externally motivated people. There's people that you probably know, unless you're on that person 24/7, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
As opposed to the person, they just do it because they're internally motivated. And as a parent, that's what you want for your kids. You want them to be the internally motivated person, you know?
And they see the benefits. They can reason through from beginning to end why it would be better to do A instead of B.
Yeah, and as a parent, you have to nurture that in your children. That's your job. Me, for instance, I have 3 daughters and 1 son, so I'm definitely outnumbered in my house.
Small army, though.
Yeah, not much testosterone.
Well, you know what,
in the beige residence.
It's a small.
Although the dogs are males, so
are they?
So we got a little bit more testosterone there with the pets, but
well, the important thing is, and again, you're rubbing in my face, that you have a legacy, you have something that will live on after you, and it's very kind of selfish to continue to throw it in my. Yeah, it's cool because whatever you impart to them is probably going to help them. If you think about things that you might have learned probably through your mom, because I know we both grew up for the majority of our childhood careers as a single parent family, but it's something that you got. And I just think we can do that. I think we do that for people on a daily basis sometimes, and we don't realize it.
Well, and as a parent, if you have multiple kids too, not every kid's going to be the same. We're all different people, right? Like you have a sister, right? And like you guys are different people. You have strengths that she doesn't have, and she has strengths that you have, character-wise or personality-wise, right?
Yeah.
I know it's hard for you to admit you have any weaknesses, but there are a few here.
It's not hard to admit. It's just that we want to discuss fact and fiction. I'm kidding.
For the sake of conversation, I'll say I have a weakness, right?
Well, and we do want to try to embrace humility here on the show. Right. Yeah, my siblings' skills and trainings, mine became more honed because during the time of our adolescence, WWF was a big deal. Many times I said, hey, I need to practice this maneuver. Please come in here. We'll use the bed for safety. And
so basically your siblings were like crash test dummies for your...
I did a lot of knee drops, elbows to the cranium. My sibling was a good sport, and I was able to better hone my abilities to decimate and destroy my adversary through her. And I want to thank you, wherever you are, my sibling, for appreciating that. But
I'm like character-wise, like she's probably got personality traits that you would wish that you maybe had more of, right?
Oh, yeah, we're we're different people, but but we definitely we've learned from each other. So especially in a single parent household, and I'm sure that you can say that too. You've shared some stories from your sister and stuff. I know that you're gonna pick up something,
right?
And your other brother or sister is gonna have to learn, and they're gonna have different challenges than you, and you're gonna learn from those, the way they overcame those.
Well, and I'm also saying, like, you may have a kid that, they're a computer whiz or something, or you may have a kid and they're great at music and art, and you may have a kid and this kid's great at sports. You should be able to see these traits within your kids and say, okay, well, I'm going to nurture this in this kid. I'm not going to force the kid that wants to play music or do art to go play sports.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. They're more adept at this, so it's not about what you want for your kids. It's kind of about what your kids want to do and you nurturing that, but also giving them the ability to find that. Because, how many of us, just think back when you were younger, how lost were you looking for, what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I like?
Yeah, I'm picturing
that self-exploration.
A little lost beige looking for the way. And there was definitely a little lost Pierce at moments. We all get lost a little bit,
right.
And I was going to make a joke out of that, but then I realized it's too emotional. Like I would be doing a disservice. So, yeah,
well, and then, back on the whole perfection thing, I know you talked about that.
I had struggled with that myself.
Yeah, my 14-year-old, I brag about her all the time. I brag about my 16-year-old too. She's my 16-year-old. She's a great musician. She plays the violin. She's awesome. I love listening to her play. My 14-year-old, she's a softball prodigy. She's awesome. Wow. Everybody loves her.
Yeah.
And she plays with girls that are much older than her, and she's just amazing. As a parent, if you have a kid like that, you have to kind of navigate that experience with your kid, in the sense that, yes, there was times when my daughter would say, I don't know if I want to play anymore. She would get down on herself or something and get discouraged. And as a parent, there's a balance there where it's like, okay, you don't want to keep forcing your kid into something that they don't want to do, but you also know that your kid has the ability to do this and that she's probably going to regret this if you allow her to stop.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to
Discipline.
balance that with like, hey, I want you to keep trying. Maybe give it some time. If you still feel this way at the end, we can discuss.
That's
this.
smart, dude. See, that's a call to wisdom. That's a requirement. That's something you've had to step up to in a way that I
right. And now she is like, she loves softball. Like that's part of her identity. If she would have stopped playing, I don't know. Maybe she would be a lot different than she is
for
now.
sure.
But she kept doing it, and she loves it, and this has become kind of part of who she is. And I feel like it's taught her a lot of good lessons, being part of a team, and all the things that being involved in athletics can teach kids too. But there are some times where she gets hard on herself if she's not perfect. So she's always striving for perfection. And as a parent, you kind of want to tell your kids, yes, it's great to strive for perfection, but you also have to balance that with allowing yourself to fail.
Well, I don't know if you want to share her name, but I was going to give her some dad advice since I don't have can I give her some advice?
Sure.
I thought it'd be more dramatic if I had her name, but
yeah.
We'll just call her Shira for now. So Shira, here's what I would tell you. Now, I'm not your dad, of course. I think you know that by now, but I am your father's friend, and we're pretty tight. I think as close as two bros can be. And what I would say is that no matter what you do, this is something my dad told me. Dad, I didn't do very well. I had a week where I was pitching and I couldn't get it where I wanted it. And he said, I was so upset one time, and he said, son, did you do your best? Well, yeah, I know I did my best. And he's like, that's all you should expect of yourself. As long as you, and the only person that's going to know if you did your best is you. So I always felt that brought me, all of a sudden one day it just brought me a lot of peace of mind, and I was able to deal with this effort that I was always striving perfection. Now, I'm not saying that healed me completely, but it helped. So keep that in mind, Shira, when you're trying to do everything just right. Remember, as long as you've done your best, and when you do your best, even when you fail, or let's say you make a mistake and you don't do your best, I don't feel like you're ever on the wrong path. It's like a bunch of branches on a tree. There's going to be a new branch, and it's going to take you to where you should be, or the best place you can be, and you'll figure out how to get to where you're supposed to be. And I like to think of mistakes like that.
Yeah. Well, and did you do your best? That's great, because it's like, as you get older and mature and become wise, you realize that if you don't do your best, the only person you're cheating is yourself.
Yeah.
There's there's nobody else that you're really cheating
because you're
other
going
than
to
yourself,
suffer the most
you know?
for
Right.
the consequences of the choice.
And that's the nice thing about being involved in team sports too, is not only do you have that pressure on yourself, but you also have the pressure of being there for your teammates. Because you're letting your teammates down too. And that can be a motivating factor as well sometimes for these kids. It's all a part of a team, because when they grow older, whether it's the military or something like that, there's going to be team environments that you're in, whether it's in the workplace or, you know, anything like that. You're going to have to work as part of a team. So these are all just life lessons. And I really liked it. Yesterday I was at our practice, and our coach kind of called all the girls there and talked to them for a bit about everything and told them about the effort that they need to come to practice with every day, you know. And it was great to hear it, because it was not just about softball. It was about life in general. Every day you need to come with effort. If you're not coming with effort, you're not striving to get better. You're complacent. You're not going to reach your goals if you're not putting forth effort.
Well, it was like what you were telling your daughter a little while ago, and hearing the coach think of that. You're almost forced to be a better version of yourself when you're trying to help somebody, whether it's a coworker or whether it's your daughter or because forces you to step outside of maybe just being a mediocre, you know, a coach or whatever, but you're thinking, okay, what are we really trying to do here? If you care. If you care at all, you're going to really try to be the best you can. And just like the pressure that's on somebody else on part of a team to perform, you have a little bit of pressure because you're a dad or you're an advisor to somebody.
And that's what I draw back to it being a balance, right? Because it can't just all be about the other people. You still have to look out. I mean, the truth is you still have to look out for yourself as well. So you can't go through life projecting on other people. Sometimes it doesn't come off as great, but if you just go through life being considerate of everybody else and not taking care of yourself, it's hard to take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself first.
Yeah, you're not going to get any joy from that either. I mean, real lasting joy. I mean, it doesn't come from having the best Darth Vader helmet. It comes from sharing it with your buddies so they can...
Or you don't want to go through life feeling like you're a martyr or something, or you've sacrificed for all this, you know, like you need to do that because that's a consideration, and you need to do that because you care about these people. But you also need to take the time to kind of do stuff for yourself and what's in your interest too sometimes. And like I had to tell my daughter, because, you know, there was times where it's like she had the option to stay with the team that she was on before, and they were all her friends and stuff that she had, and she was in her comfort zone on this team. Okay. Yeah. Right. And then there was an opportunity to play with another team. She didn't know any girls on this team. They were all older than her, 3, 4, 5 years older than her on this team. And they were playing against much better competition. And
that's like 2 or 3 grades higher. Wow.
Yes. So she had the opportunity to do that. And we had the conversation, and I'm like, well, and this is where you have to think. And this is, for me, this is like a feather in my cap for parenting here, because I could have, some people might say, well, you're going to that team and that's just the way it is because I said so, you know? Okay, what are your goals here? What do you want to do? Do you want to continue to play softball in college? Do you want to be the best player that you can be? Is that your priority? So you need to identify what you want to do with this long term first and think about that. And I told her, I said, look, if you want to do that, you need to take yourself out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself, and you will get better. With like iron sharpens iron type. If you just get complacent, you don't improve a lot. You're just comfortable. So if you're just there to have fun and do whatever, stay with that team. But one thing I did say, and this is based on my life experience, and as a parent, that's what you do, right? You try to incorporate your previous experience and how you raise your kids and the lessons you try to teach them. You know, I told her, I said, look, the thing is you may stay on this team for this girl or for this friend or something, but what happens in 3 weeks or 2 months when that girl leaves? And now you sacrifice something, and that girl didn't consider you the way that you considered her. And now you're in this situation because you chose something for somebody or that wasn't necessarily in your best interest, but because you wanted to still hang out with your friends. But now 3 months down the road, the situation's changed, they're gone, and that opportunity's gone now because you passed up on it. Try to force your kids to think a little
think things through for themselves.
Right.
A stick up for dads here too with something that I think is heroic, and I have a hard time, I'll be honest with you, accepting, well, just the idea that I would do this. I'm not sure. You have to get up. Now, I know you want your daughter to do well in these games and you want her to keep winning, but every time she wins, that means you may have to be getting up early again on another weekend morning to go somewhere, and there's some of that is fun or that you get some satisfaction and joy out of because it's your daughter. But I take my hat off to you that you have to go to these different places every weekend where maybe you're sitting next to some people that you wouldn't necessarily pick to sit next to.
Dude, there's been times I've had to leave the house at like 5 o'clock in the morning, to get on to the other side of the city by like 6 a.m. So yeah. I mean, there's some sacrifice there, but I mean, as a parent, it's like, but like you said, anybody else who's got kids in sports or performing, let's say it like an orchestra or band or something, like you watching your kid perform and succeed,
there's nothing
almost
better
nothing
than that.
like
That's cool.
You're so happy for him. You're so like prideful.
Yeah.
Like my daughter played in a tournament this past week, and she had a jersey, and on the last name, our names our last names on her jersey, and it's
that's wow.
She's representing our family and like my name. That's cool,
that is neat.
And I even bought like a parent jersey to wear to show my support for her while I was out there. So it's a prideful thing too,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And there's not much else out there that's as like when you're a parent, even if you accomplish something, you're not as ecstatic about that as if your kid accomplishes something.
Wow. And that's interesting because the whole thing sounds horrible to me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding because going to all the different games and all the different, I've been to a couple. It is really something when somebody you care about is out there and you get to see them do well. That's cool. I think we've really reached the depths. I think the last 2 shows, we've gone so far into these deep places that I didn't know we were going to go to in Hose, you know? And I want to say it's a testament to my critical thinking ability.
We left the funny behind for a few shows here, I think.
Well,
right?
I think there's still some sprinkled in and out of there, but it's dynamic. It's organic. It's not like we try to force anything. We sometimes have a topic that we try to discuss, but I just thought this was a good one for Dad's Day, for Father's Day. I don't think Father's Day, everybody has a different concept of maybe what a father is or what we should be thinking about on Father's Day. But to me, I see it as an opportunity to consider how can I be a good daddy to the world? I mean, not just to my own kids, but with the people that I come into contact with. And we may not all have had the perfect father. There is no such thing, but you can at least appreciate the things that a good dad should do. And I think we as members of society and humanity, we can all think of what can I do better that's going to help somebody else. And not necessarily because it's about my weekend or what I get to do, but I'm making the drive out. In this analogy, I'm making the drive and it's going to be a little sacrifice so that I can help somebody else. And then maybe it'll be a good feeling when you get to see something work out for that person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a biological father, but I think the thing with fatherhood is helping somebody else, mentoring somebody else, helping somebody else succeed and finding that joy out of being a positive influence on somebody else's life, you know, generally somebody probably younger that's coming up and being that mentor to that person. Because I do think that if we all just live our lives and everything is about me, that just leads to a vacant place eventually.
Yeah.
It just becomes very shallow eventually. Irregardless of how much stuff you have, irregardless of how much you've accomplished, at the end, it's just lacking something that you can't replace without getting that from. And like I said, you don't have to be a biological father. And that's why fatherhood to me is not just, are you a sperm donor, I guess, but are you having a positive influence? Are you mentoring? That's all aspects. That's the most important aspect of fatherhood, really, you know?
Yeah.
And something that I think every generation has probably struggled with as parents is like, how do I convey these overreaching themes in life or these nuggets of wisdom or general ways to live our life? I'm referencing back to when you told that story about your coach and how he was talking about making eye contact, right? Yeah. And that's just an overall theme of engaging in the person, showing them respect. That is so important in life in general, outside of football and everything else. So that's like a general overarching theme in life, and how do you live your life? And being able to convey those lessons, but in a differing age of societal pressures, technology. These kids nowadays, when we grew up, it's just a totally different experience for these kids. You know, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media. Our social network was basically school.
And with people you could make eye contact with.
Yeah, and with people that you actually engaged with face to face. And
Right.
now there's just 24/7 societal pressure on these people, and especially as a girl dad, you have these girls that I feel bad for these young girls, in all honesty, is because they are so preoccupied with beauty and looks and aesthetics, and it's all influenced by social media. And half of these images that they're trying to portray themselves as, it's not even real. It's somebody's used a filter. This isn't reality.
Yeah.
You're trying to hold yourself to an unreal standard. You can never achieve that, because that's not real, what you're trying to do. But you had brought up, I think, before, when you were at the gym and seeing some of these younger girls and maybe the way that they're dressed and
Oh, yeah.
and that stuff. And you know, the older you get as a man, and especially as like the father of girls, it's like, I want you to portray yourself to the world in a different way, because you have more value than just that.
Yeah, like a dignified
Yeah, like
way.
you're not just your looks,
Yeah.
you know. But I know that there's pressure on women for that.
I was telling you that when I go to the gym, on the days that I know there's a lot of younger kids that go at a certain time of day, and then, I don't know, it's just a weird dynamic where it becomes more of a social thing. And I see people dressing that way to try to get attention from the opposite sex. And then if one person dresses in a very risque way, then the other person has to almost go a little bit beyond that. And so now it's almost like nobody's wearing any pants at all. They're just showing up to the gym with just their tighty whities on, whether it's a girl or a guy. And I'm like, how much shorter and tighter can this get before we just realize you can't one up? The only next way to go is to just show up in the nude.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, and that's why, you know, probably through the dawn of time, back when there was like cavemen,
Yeah.
the caveman was probably seeing his daughter with the loincloth a little too short or
Yeah.
something, was like, hey, you're not going out like that, you know?
Let's put some more loincloths
Yeah,
on
let's extend the loincloth
Yeah.
here a little bit, you know? And that's because that's the perception of a father, is like, why are you presenting yourself that way? Is that the kind of attention that you're trying to get? I want you to get better attention than that. I want you to get a better quality of person than what you are trying to attract. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
I always think when I go to the gym, I want to leave something to the imagination. I want to let's cover things up and let it be a mysterious thing that, well, let's see. I don't know how certain things are. I don't know why you're smiling, because this is a very serious, but I've talked about this on the show before, but way too much premeditated effort, man, in the way people go to the
color coordination, all the way from the
just so many
shoelaces to
things
the
happening,
headband.
man. So many things happening. If you've evolved to the point where you have your own at-home gym, that's probably the healthiest attire you could get.
And I mean, that's what I think a lot of times gyms have almost become, is like a pickup place, right? Sometimes, me personally, would you really want to date somebody from the gym? Because if things don't go well, you got to see that person.
You got to get a new gym.
You got to get a new gym.
Yeah, new gym time. Yeah, we really took a little detour there. Gym time is a sacred time to get things. It's almost like we've discussed in the restroom. Get in and get out. Yeah, it's fun to have some social experiences at the gym, or if you go with somebody. But look, everybody's kind of smelly. You're going to hear phrases, terminology.
Too many bros.
In circles with people that you probably wouldn't have decided to have a conversation in. So expedite and get through all that. And for those people that are lucky enough,
the way I look at it, it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil.
Half the time I go to the gym and I'm just like a zombie. I go into zombie mode.
Yeah.
Which is probably isn't.
Out,
yeah, just tune everybody out, and I'm just like,
no eye contact.
Yeah, you're just like kind of like on autopilot. Yeah, you know,
half starved. Just had a little bit of a energy thing, and
there you go.
Think about what you're doing. It doesn't get any more Neanderthal than that. You're just moving something back and forth.
Yeah,
back and forth. You're moving it. Yeah, with all of our fancy smartphones and our earbuds and the technology we need to entertain ourselves, you're really just moving something back and forth.
Basically, you're like, again, I'll invoke the caveman again. You're basically caveman picking up a rock, but now they've changed the shape of the rock to where it has like a little handle on it. Yeah. But it's the same.
Right.
It's the same like effect,
Yeah.
you know?
There's so many different ways we've designed for you to move the rock now, but it's
Right.
got,
It's like a prettier rock.
oh, the way that guy's picking the rock up isn't right. Look at, this is how you should do it. you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
I love listening to those things where people are trying to show each other. That's the kind of dad advice you don't get.
Oh, God.
We make a lot of
That's
fun
not dad advice. That's like dude trying to pick up chick at gym advice, like
yeah.
giving like the amateur personal
Yeah,
trainer guy.
and look like they have some kind of specialty. I've never been able to provide anybody with any advice in the gym, and I think one time I did because someone asked, and even I was kind of laughing at myself as I tried to help them.
I would never do like that's the craziest. I mean, I know we're getting off topic here, but that's the craziest thing. I see it and I just laugh because I'm like,
it's
dude,
weird.
like, what are your certifications?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
What are my
like-
certifications to tell you if you ask me? I'm like, well, it works for me.
Right.
And yeah, I've maybe Googled some things or YouTube
But I would
something.
never have the audacity to go up to somebody and be like, dude, you got to do it. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing? You know?
I see people do that still, and it's like fascinating to me. And you wonder, how did this person become such an expert? Like, where did they get the certification?
Because they're probably the type of person that, and we all know these types of people that, like, irregardless of the topic, they're just the expert on everything.
Yeah, they have
you know?
they have a little pearl of wisdom for
Oh,
you in
yeah.
any topic that you choose to pick up.
Yeah.
and
No,
go
no
into.
training, no certifications, but they're just the expert on everything.
And these people will say stuff with a lot of efficacy. They want to be a dad with way too much conceited veracity of fact that they have. The arguments that they can put together as to why you should do something can't even be questioned.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
impervious.
And that's, I think, what we started off with. Like, one of the lessons as a dad is to tell people, like, you don't know everything,
Yeah.
and you're probably never going to know everything.
Right.
And I'm not the greatest dad because
Yeah.
there is no greatest dad out
Right.
there. We all screw up.
Well, except
know?
for you, because I think you're kind of like I said, the daddy of the hose.
I'm definitely not. I have my faults for sure. I have my personality flaws big time.
Well, let's go ahead and break into this next segment that we're going to call What Would You Do? And there's only two of us. And
Oh,
so
who are you going to pick?
we'll put our names in a hat and we'll decide who gets which one until we get the other person's names. It might be a long game. We have the 50-50 chance.
I don't know if I came with a what would you do.
Okay, well,
Just
I'll go first. I kind of thought of something. Sometimes what happens is Pierce will put something out on a text. Some of those words are consumed, some of them are not. But this is why people, and I don't want to take any shots. I mean, I'm not even looking at you right now, so it makes it less awkward. But, this was put out a little while ago. But anyway, so What Would You Do is a game. We thought it would be a way to try and, because it sounds like in a very sterile environment, we're sitting here diagnosing how you should and shouldn't behave, or maybe incorporating from our own mistake things that we've done, and then we analyze them, how we can do better socially. But it's really, and it's usually for humor and maybe some wisdom or truths that we hope to find along the way. But we don't necessarily engage life like that. You have to make decisions with a split-second reaction time as to how you're going to handle things. And then later on, you've probably gone back and thought, oh, gosh, I wish I had done this or said this. So that's kind of what we do on the show. And that's what Would You Do is about. It's a game where we do.
I think I actually have come up with a what would you do while you
I
were,
thought I was.
while you were
yeah,
rambling
I thought
on.
if I just kept talking.
Yeah, while you were rambling
and,
on there. it came up.
I guess in a way it would have been classy not to just say, that I had been rambling. I guess you
Yeah.
could have done it. But again, that's for example, what
Yeah.
would you do? What would you do if your friend tries to embarrass you like that?
Accuse you of
so
being a
rudely?
blabbermouth.
Yeah, includes you of being a blowhard right to your face. I mean, what do you do? How do you respond? My what would you do is involving a scenario where, let's say you've been giving some advice to somebody. You've been, for all intents purposes, like their dad. And then you give them some advice and they don't take it. And as a result, something bad happens to them, and then they come back to you and they say, oh, look what happened. And now you see that the consequences are dire. It's a bad situation. And let's say that it involves a moral component, something that you would say, gosh, that's something you should have known not to do because that puts you or somebody else in jeopardy. Now you find out that they didn't do it, and they're really kind of petulant or
Defiant.
Yeah, they're defiant and at their own peril, but they now are reaping what they've sown. And now they're coming to you for support, and you've got to reach down and be gracious. And without any specifics, I'm asking, how do you handle that? I don't know if that'd be any different for your kids versus somebody who's more of an acquaintance or just a friend, but how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, I would say nobody wants to hear I told you so.
Right.
So that would be a non-starter for me, because once somebody says, I told you so, then it's like, okay, this is all just about like, you were wrong, I was right.
Yeah.
And then
winning an argument.
Yeah, winning an argument and like point scoring as opposed to like, being constructive. I would say I would talk to that person and try to, obviously primary concern is offering support, because that's why they're going to you, is they're in emotional peril probably.
Yeah.
But then also moving forward and trying to learn like a life lesson out of that, whatever that is. And then offer advice in the future. Hell yeah, maybe next time you meet a girl like that, like, but not go back, dude, I told you. Right. What did I tell you? Then that conversation isn't going to be as constructive. So yeah, nobody wants to hear that. So that's basically what I would do.
That's good stuff, man.
Do you have a real life?
Well, no, and I know that's kind of general, but there's something that happened to me like that, and I tried to accept that there was a point at which it was no longer about being able to help somebody avoid a risk or a consequence, because now they were engaged in the consequence or experiencing the ill effects of what they had done. But now it was trying to give them a moral support in a way to where they didn't feel like, I think what happens with people is sometimes they just feel like they've been thrown out, they're trash, or they've made a mistake that's beyond repair, and now there's nowhere left for them to go. And I think what happens to people is then they just continue, and it gets worse.
And I think a lot of times I think the tendency is for people to always want to offer solutions to a problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like
just gotta listen.
The consequence of the problem's already occurred. There is no solution to the problem. There's nothing to offer as far as a solution goes or a way forward to fix anything, because it's unfixable. You're like you said here. So all that's left is I need to be there for this person to just. Sometimes all people need is to get stuff out.
Right.
Everything that they're thinking about internally, they need to vocalize it. They need somebody else to hear it.
You might be helping somebody so that they don't harm themselves worse in the future or in the immediate future, and I'm not talking about just hurting themselves, but avoiding the pitfalls of reoccurring a cyclical behavior. Or sometimes people need to know, oh, I messed up, and I still can do better.
Well, there's a big thing, I think, especially if somebody's going through a period like that, and maybe they feel really down and depressed, and because along with that probably comes a feeling of isolation. Like think of any alienation, isolation. If you're in a bad place, think about it. Like, how many of us feel like one of the prevailing feelings of that is feeling like you're alone, right? And so if you're able to talk to somebody, even if you're the person that's listening, you shouldn't have to feel like, oh, I need to give this person the perfect advice, how they can fix this. A lot of times, all that person needs to hear is that somebody actually cares, that they give a shit.
Oof, yeah.
And that's it, because that feeling of isolation, loneliness, you feel like nobody cares, but if you're able to talk to somebody and they support you or whatever, to actually feel like somebody else cares, that's huge.
Yeah, it's never too late to right the ship either. You can always,
right.
There's something.
And there's a difference too, because I think we've all been in those situations, and maybe there's stuff, maybe your employer, wherever you work, they'll offer, oh, here's people that will talk to you and stuff. And that's great if the employers and stuff offer that. But for me, when I talk to somebody, I want to talk to somebody that I feel like genuinely cares.
You have a connection with.
Or genuinely cares. I don't want to talk to somebody who's like, whose job it is to listen to you.
Gotcha, yeah.
And that's the thing. And therapy is great for some people and whatever, but where I struggle with therapy sometimes is I always think, well, this is this person's job.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's hard for me to get past that, where it's like
they're just
listening and caring because they're getting paid.
Yeah, they're just sitting there trying not to laugh because they have to.
As opposed to if you have a friend or a family member or somebody that you're like, this person's genuine, this person genuinely gives a shit about me, then like that.
Well, we didn't need to use the bad word.
Well, I had to.
I guess it was.
Yeah. Well,
sorry,
we'll
guys.
bleep that. You can replace that with a word of your choice and edit.
Another explicit episode.
Pick any noun you want as opposed to the S word when you edit the show.
Yeah, well, it's
like the old 80s movies when they dub in that word.
Yeah.
It
says the guy not
like in Ferris Bueller's, stick a diamond up his
ear.
Yeah, stick a diamond in his ear, or
stick a piece of coal. Yeah,
stick a piece of coal in his ear, and it'll become a diamond, right?
Yeah. Well, what would you do, man? It's
okay. So in the spirit of Father's Day, let's say that you had a daughter, and I'm not saying, I had mentioned, I think I had mentioned that my daughters have boyfriends now, which is another great part of being a parent.
Oof, yeah, I don't like.
And I'm not saying that this is actually. I think both boys are pretty decent, pretty happy with both of them at this point.
Oh, that's good.
But let's say hypothetically, like you are a parent of a girl in particular, and she has this boy that she brings over, and you don't like this kid at all. And you're terrified that they're going to, especially once they're older, 17, 18, you're like, oh, don't get pregnant, right? Don't get pregnant. Or you're just like, don't marry this guy, How do you proceed if that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, my instinct is that I want to influence her away from this person. But I think that for some reason I have it in my mind that it's best to resist the overt appearance of that, because you may only make them more interested in this bad guy or whatever,
right?
And make him look more attractive somehow. I think
Would you sabotage him?
Maybe put a banana in his tailpipe next time, or maybe create some social images that
be like, hey, this guy was out at the bar with all these women. What is this?
Yeah, and look, they're hookers. Do you really want to date a guy? Well, see, there you go. That might make him seem more attractive.
Oh, bad boy.
More bad boy. Yeah, he's dating older ladies that are hookers. Even though they look clearly photoshopped into the picture.
Right.
I've got all kinds of ideas running through my brain. I really think some of those things start, I don't want to get all Jedi answer that escapes the difficulty of the question altogether, but it's kind of like if you give somebody the foundations of what an example of what a guy should be like, hopefully eventually if you have a good relationship, to me the most important one is with a daughter with her dad, or somebody else that maybe later on has some qualities that could be like father figure-ish in a way, but it's basically one of the most important relationships a girl learns from. And if they've seen an example of how you treat them and how you treat their mom or how you interact, that'll hopefully give them the foundation so they don't go date a turd. Mm-hmm. Because that's what I think sometimes is unfortunate for some people, is they don't get to see a good example of that. So they go out there and then they find the first experience they have, and then after that they just continue to they recreate that situation.
Right.
If they're lucky enough to get out of it. Geez, I don't know how we've continued to spin into these deep questions where I could have been funny about it, but I also have a duty to try to help the world. That's what we're doing here on Heroes of Humility, I think. So I would say try to give them a good example to start with, anticipating that's going to happen someday. But if you're already in the situation and they're dating somebody that you don't like, and you don't try to be too overt about it, plant some seeds, maybe ask them the question to get them to look at his behavior. Maybe they're not seeing it.
Don't tell, but don't tell them stuff.
Yeah, don't be too, say, well, what are your, have any of the girls in school noticed when he does something weird or does something? Get them to look at it maybe on how it looks to others. So I think sometimes we get so in our own ecosystem about our relationship with a particular person that's not good for us that we forget to see what it might be like on the outside looking in. And if maybe you can do that with your daughter or whoever it is that's in a bad relationship, maybe they'll get to see a little bit. I don't know. That's still a hard thing to do.
Well, and one thing I've learned, and I agree with you on your answer, because I think a lot of times if you, again, you get to a point as a parent, what you want to do a lot of times is you just want to tell, right? And it's just like, I'm telling you this is what you, but
they won't internalize
that has
it.
The opposite
it's almost like the force,
sometimes.
The lock thing we discussed, because when you take that away, they're going to want to do.
Well, and you hope that, like you said, you've instilled enough in them that they have enough respect for it. They'll realize this person's not good for me. I deserve better, blah, blah, blah.
What's important
and you want them to internalize that. But one thing that I have, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but one thing I heard once that makes sense to me, you can gauge the quality of your relationship generally in the future by the relationship that person has with the parent of the opposite sex.
Interesting.
So for men, how is your wife's relationship with her father? And it doesn't have to be a biological father, could be a stepfather, whatever, but how does she respect him? Do they have a good quality relationship there? And then vice versa for men, how does that man treat his mom? And that's going to gauge a lot of times how successful your relationship's going to be.
Hurts my brain, dude. That's a good one.
I mean, interesting. Honestly, that in my own life, I think I've seen a lot of that.
Now, what about people that haven't had those parents around or haven't had, and you're like, well, I mean, you can't. It's hard because
Well, you can't paint with too broad of a brush, like I said, but I think a lot of times what I'm trying to convey is like if you find, as a man, if you find a woman and she's got a great relationship with her father and it's a very healthful relationship, it's probably a good sign that you guys are going to have a pretty good relationship if you're a normal person,
and
too.
it stinks if you might run into
You
some
may not be a
girls that
normal
haven't
person.
had that. They didn't have that. So
Right.
you don't want to just give up on them. But
I almost think that, but there's a difference between not having that and having that and having it be toxic.
Yeah.
That's probably
maybe they learned
the
it
worst.
somewhere else.
Right.
where
That's
it
probably the
became-
worst is if like they have that relationship, but that's a really horrible relationship.
Yeah.
As opposed to that relationship just doesn't exist at all. You
Right.
know? And the same thing applies to men. You know, what if a man grows up without a mom? I mean, that happens too.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well,
so-
you got to have a mom at least from the beginning, because otherwise, right? Because your mom is what made you.
well,
into
yeah,
being-
but I'm saying like you don't have a mom in your life.
yeah, let's not be. Yeah,
Yeah,
come on,
you didn't
Pierce.
like. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
don't
not.
be stupid.
Yeah,
But I see what you're saying.
you weren't spawned like
Yeah.
just
just like an egg,
like a
that-
Terminator.
like the stork dropped you from.
Like a lightning bolt came down and you just like emerged like Arnold.
Well, maybe that's sometimes Pierce. People might think that's the way Pierce
Oh
is.
yeah,
Dude, it's been a happy Father's Day to you. I'm not really.
gonna head out of here and spend the rest of the day with the kids. So.
That's cool. And I didn't get the invite. I'll be there with you in spirit. And please pass along to Shira. Well, maybe she'll listen.
I try to get the kids to listen. Sometimes if we're in like I'm taking her to a tournament on the other side of town and she's like stuck with me for an hour,
Yeah.
can't get out. It's like, okay, we're putting on the
Nice.
podcast. I'll make you listen to it, you know?
Even if we have to force people to listen to this podcast, I feel
exactly.
like we're doing a
But
service.
that's still a download,
yeah.
right? Even if it's a forced download,
Yeah, it's still a download. It's still part of the statistics. And we hope that we have brought you statistical levity, fun. Maybe it's something you felt like you had to listen to because your dad forced you to. But we were your daddies today. Beige is like our daddy. I'm not a daddy, but I've been a daddy to other people. This will all make sense, hopefully, as you listen to the whole show. Thank you very much for joining us and look forward to the next episode. It should be coming out in about 2 weeks. Where we'll be having, hopefully, our cosplay guests we're excited about. And
Hopefully we'll have a full house again.
lots of surprises in store.
Red and 11 will be back, hopefully.
And you get to see what kind of stuff Beige and I can get into. You know, it was just the two of us here and we figured it out. Thanks a lot, listeners. Take care. Be cool, be safe, be kind. This is Pierce signing off with
Beige.
later.
Bye.
Bye.